is revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast today. It is December 3rd, 2025. What's up? So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the fraud that Democrats, the Democrat Party, liberals in general, and the establishment have portrayed upon the American public really for some time. It's becoming very clear, as I mentioned previously, that the Democrats like to hand out a lot of money. And if you don't think that it's not going to selected groups or they're giving a wink and a nod toward fraud, they don't care about the rule of law or what it represents. So the real question is, the real political choice is, are you for freedom or fraud? Every day the truth becomes clearer. The Democratic Party perpetrates an immense fraud on the American people and follow it up with propaganda, misdirection, and lies. The Republicans, or at least the new Republicans, on the other hand, MAGA, the Tea Party, are trying to restore the republic to a foundation of truth, merit, and reward for honest, hardworking citizens. That's citizens. So we're going to get to over 40 headlines in the next hour or so. I have already been plagued with some technical issues this morning and yesterday. I can't get certain things to work, so I wish I knew why that was. Let's see here. Making sure everything's good. So let's break into the headlines for today, December 3rd, 2025. Already issues. All right. Let's start with the New York Times. Trump calls affordability a con job as his edge on the economy slips. President Trump is growing frustrated as Americans struggle with higher prices and pessimism over the state of the economy. Now, it is sort of a con job, and we went over this ad nauseum with the Federal Reserve chairman and some people on the Fed board insisting on not lowering interest rates, which is basically putting a stranglehold on the economy because people need to borrow money and they don't want to do it at the current rate. I really don't even want to say that. What they want to do is they would like, the markets like, and people like predictability. Leaving it ambiguous, leaving this ambiguous nature surrounding whether or not they're going to lower interest rates and when is quite disturbing to the market and just for people that are trying to make money and then trickle down with hiring and giving, hopefully giving their employees benefits, raises, etc. None of this is happening because people are in a wait and see on whether or not they're going to lower interest rates, because you're not going to borrow money now at this rate if the rate next month is going to go down. It's simple. Now, Trump calls the affordability issue a con job in the sense that it is, because it's not Trump's fault. He's only been in office 10 months. And if you think you could turn a sour economy around in a month or two, you're wrong. And I keep calling this the inflation hangover because inflation that rose approximately 25% over 4 years, that's a devaluation of your dollar of 25%, which means a dollar in 2019 is now worth 75 cents or 70 cents. So that's where people see the increase in prices. It took a while for suppliers or retailers to allow this to happen. There had to be a correction, but they don't want to do it all at once. A supplier, a retailer is not going to jack up prices even if their prices go up, because they're going to scare away their customers and push their customers to other sources. PJ Media has the headline, affordability is actually a winning issue for the GOP. The reason this is because the economy is going to improve. The New York Times, the Democrats, the liberals, angling toward the midterm, are concerned with, rightfully so, winning the midterm and want to portray Trump and the Trump administration in the worst light possible. And that means out of touch in as far as the economy is concerned, and out of touch in every realm. And then they try to sidetrack the issue with terrorism, and then they pivot once again towards Venezuela. And I'm not going to argue Venezuela at all. I'm going to get to the Pete Hegseth thing. It's neither here nor there. It's about sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. The fact that, we allowed Venezuela to become communist. I guess it's their right to determination to vote in Hugo Chavez. But everybody knows that the most recent election was not fair and that it was rigged. That's what the left likes to do because they can't win on the merit. And as I said yesterday, if you're living in a communist dictatorship, who's going to vote for the communist dictatorship? Nobody, obviously. So we're going to move on to other fraud schemes and bids by the Democrats to try to undermine what is happening. Now, Just the News has the headline, another Democrat fizzle after Black Friday boycott results in record-breaking shopping. Democrats' call to undermine President Trump and interrupt Black Friday shopping is another Get Trump attempt that fizzled. This year's Black Friday and the following weekend produced record-breaking numbers for businesses across America, both online and in person, much to the chagrin of Democrat-led boycott efforts like Wobbit, We Ain't Buying It. The Wobbit campaign, backed by Soros-funded Indivisible.org and routed to Act Blue for donations, spread online and on the social media leading up to this year's biggest shopping weekend and urged customers to refrain from patronizing three specific businesses, Target, Home Depot, and Amazon, for colluding with the Trump administration or something like that. That's not what this is about. This is about Soros and the Democrats trying to tank the economy, specifically don't buy, because Black Friday is the biggest indicator of the biggest economic output season period during the year. So the last quarter, that's the whole consumerism behind Christmas. I'm not going to get into it too much, but the last quarter of the year is the biggest sales, especially retail sales, period. And Black Friday is the indicator of that, the best indicator we have, the first big buying day of that period. So they tried to wrap it up in a bow of anti-Trump and this and that, and this Wobbit, We Ain't Buying It, to get consumers to boycott one of the biggest retail shopping days of the year, which is, as I said, an indicator of the biggest, one of the biggest growth periods during economically during the year in the United States. So why would you try to sabotage the economy, which is the economy is the rising tide that lifts all boats, provided it's rising? Why would they do that? Because they're trying to tank the economy. Shit like this and Jerome Powell hedging on interest rates, interest rate reduction is the problem. And fortunately, people aren't buying it. So, as Just the News rightly reported, that people aren't buying into this shit. Don't go shopping because only the severe activists did, and they just, it wasn't measurable. So that's a good sign. The point is, as I said, we're going back to the Fed time and time again. You're not going to have the great improvement in the economy until they lower interest rates. And as I said, when they lowered interest rates just recently, a quarter point, only a quarter point, you're not going to see the effects of that for 3 months. Matter of fact, things are actually going to get worse in the near term. Right after you have a cut in interest rates, there's a downtrend, and then you see things slightly improve, and then a real improvement after 3 months. So even when this interest rate cut last month, you're not going to see the real improving of the economy from that rate cut till February. That's why they delayed on purpose to set them up for the midterms. So they're going to drag their feet as long as possible. There should have been a rate cut in June. They waited. There were 3 scheduled rate cuts would have happened before the latest one. They didn't do any of them because of inflation, because tariffs. They spun this myth that tariffs are inflationary, and everybody bought into it. They just aren't. All right, next headline. Dell CEO pumps $6 billion into Trump accounts that promise seed money for newborn babies. Michael Dell is worth an estimated $151 billion, obviously of Dell Computers, making him the 10th richest person in the world. Now, what is this if you didn't know what this was? So Trump had the idea of for every newborn baby giving them $1,000 for them to open an account. I mean, obviously that would go to the parents. It's I don't know if it would be in trust, if they would be able to get to that money. It's hard to say. The details haven't really been fleshed out yet. They should be, but they aren't. But the idea is to give every newborn baby $1,000, and that's going to be dovetailed with the tariff benefit or dividend checks for $2,000 for qualifying people. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I don't understand why people aren't on board with what's going on in Trump world. The tax breaks for working people, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, why people haven't gotten on board with those things. And maybe they have. I mean, maybe I'm paying too much attention to what people are saying instead of the actuality, like of the common person. All you do is hear these people online squawking about this, squawking about that, affordability. The government can't bring down prices, right? The only way they could do that is subsidizing maybe an industry to produce more. That could do it. But don't forget those subsidies come out of your tax dollars. So Fox News has a headline: Trump administration strikes deal with Ohio to clean up state voter rolls using federal database. Agreement provides a 20-year access to federal database after lawsuit against the then Biden administration. And this was an agreement between Ohio Republicans and now the Trump administration. But the lawsuit began under the Biden administration because the Biden administration, the DOJ, was threatening Ohio for cleaning up their voter rolls. Which why should, you know, I don't understand why the avenues of fraud are kept wide open, whether it's mail-in ballots or not being able to update voter rolls, and in some cases, the gerrymandering, which is still problematic. Like I said, it's constitutional, but they ruled that it can't be race-based. So how do you undo that without taking into consideration of race, which is what we saw in Texas? All right, moving to another top headline here from the New York Times. Trump calls Somalis garbage in an anti-immigrant tirade. Whether it's all, is it all garbage? Are they all Somalis garbage? It's hard to say. You know, they hinge on these quotes for that Trump said. Trump talks like that. I don't have a problem with how people talk. I have a problem with how they act. And so if he calls Somalis garbage, yeah, okay. They traditionally have been voting Democrat in Minnesota, so again, it's the red-green alliance. Not that all Somalis are Muslim either. I mean, that's not even necessarily so, but the issue in Minnesota, the issue is, first of all, taking in too many migrants from specific regions, resettling them all together can be problematic, because then you create like little Mogadishu and problems like this. But again, when you bring in large swaths of unskilled, uneducated foreign populations, put them all in one place, you're going to get $1 billion worth of fraud with a wink and the nudge from the Biden administration and Democrats, including Tim Walz. And if you really look into the story, because we covered the story back when the tip of the iceberg started to show, and Tim Walz was like, don't look at my Somalis. And it all ties to the Biden administration again, with spending an extra $2 trillion for COVID relief that they didn't have to spend. The Federalist has the headline, "Scamming Somalis are the love children of Dems' mass welfare and immigration policy." And that headline basically sums it all up, as I just said. You have mass immigration of unskilled, uneducated people. You put them all in one spot, and then the general welfare, SNAP, etc., the other goodies aren't enough, because that's what the Democrats like to do. They take tax dollars and allow people to steal it to make them upper middle class or rich in some cases. And even the City Journal, Christopher Rufo, has the headline, "The Somali fraud story busts liberal myths. Mass immigration, anti-racism, and the welfare state lead inexorably to fraud." I can never spit that out. Inexorably. Still early. Didn't have enough coffee this morning. Inexorably to fraud. Without a doubt. I mean, it's Christopher Rufo, so any of you moderates out there goes, well, it's Christopher Rufo. You have to reverse engineer. You know, you can't go, oh, it's Christopher Rufo saying so, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It's $1 billion of taxpayer money, or money that was borrowed, and you complain about affordability. This is the fucking reason. This is the reason it's called inflation, because the Biden administration spent too much money. I mean, some of it was just floating out there, $8 billion to the EPA for God knows what. Green New Deal. It was all, the Inflation Reduction Act actually raised inflation. And giving $9 billion for windmills that weren't slated to be built, hidden somewhere in the EPA, and then another billion to, fake recipients of COVID aid. I mean, come on. Like I said, I like other cultures. Was the first multi-culti. Uh, to each their own, whatever. It's not like I like Arab culture, whatever, West Indian culture, whatever it is. Doesn't mean I want to take part in that culture or adopt that culture. I like multi-culti. It's just interesting to me. I have my own culture and that's fine, but I find the diversity of culture interesting. But the problem is if you come to America, there has to be a certain amount of integration, assimilation. You can't just go to another country and say, we're going to start doing things the way we did in Somalia. Now, obviously, there's some sort of morality issue there. It's the same thing with a lot of Eastern European and Slavic nations, Ukraine. They don't look at corruption as a bad thing. It's just part of doing business for the most part. We don't accept that here in the United States. It is what it is. Law is a law. You abide by the law. If you don't like the law, you can make efforts to change it politically. In any case, I thought this interesting also, given the immigration here, that's sort of mirroring what happened in Europe. Zero Hedge has the headline, "A third of Glasgow children don't speak English." Nearly 1 in 3 children in Glasgow, that's Scotland if you didn't know, primary schools do not speak English as their first language, according to a new council data, highlighting a dramatic shift driven by record migration levels that are overwhelming local resources and raising urgent questions about integration and public services. That cost money, taxpayer money. Nobody cares. It's economics. There's one thing I know about Americans and most people, they don't like to do math. They don't even like to think about math. Which is a shame because everything is based on economics. So they squawk about affordability, but they don't understand how macroeconomics work. Post-Millennial has the headline, "Trump voids all pardons. Executive order signed using Biden's unauthorized auto pen." Statement follows a similar declaration from last week. The details have to be worked out here. Who exactly, what are you going to do? Put people back in jail? Maybe. The important part is, and that hasn't been reported for some reason, is that the people that got preemptive pardons, like Anthony Fauci and others, I think General Mark Milley was one, that they're open for prosecution now. And I think, was it Anna Paulina Luna or Rand Paul? Somebody was itching at starting an investigation into Fauci, which should commence immediately. Some New York City news. New York City shootings hit an all-time low. Subways are safer. Retail theft dips 20% as Zohran Mamdani enters office. It is his to screw up. Certainly is. I don't know why the Democrats didn't like Eric Adams, ex-police officer. People voted him in. They liked him. He certainly was able to fix the spiraling crime issue that was left to him by that other idiot. But Eric Adams was an ex-cop, so He did some good things. The problem is that he cozied up to Trump around immigration because he had these people flooding into New York City and overwhelming the system. And then he happened to speak the truth about it. Nope. Democrats axed him. What was the former mayor? Bill. It's too early still. Next headline up is from the Federalist. Washington Post's latest Hegseth hoax is so weak, even the New York Times can see through it. Yeah, so I read the New York Times article. I didn't read the Washington Post article. This is, first of all, this is a non-story. Are you trying to tell me the United States doesn't have the military right or might to strike out at anything militarily that it sees as a concerted threat to the United States? Doesn't bother me. It's reasserting the Monroe Doctrine, sphere of influence. There shouldn't be a communist country. I mean, Cuba's a long been a friggin' issue. But if he wants to, strike out at drug boats, come on. Come on. These are drug boats. There's no, the fact that the Democrats and liberals are saying, well, it's illegal and these are fishermen. We know they're not fishermen. Most of them are originating from Venezuela. I think all of them. The intelligence is clear and it doesn't bother me. So the thing is, Hegseth ordered them to restrike the boat, the survivors, and who the fuck cares? You've been warned. You can't do it. So I'm sorry. I don't have any sympathy here. Allowing such an easily interdictable situation to continue is beyond me. I don't understand. And like Pete Hegseth says, what are we going to do? We're going to, the fact is it keeps recurring. To have the Coast Guard, and this costs more money, technically, to have the Coast Guard patrol, and the Coast Guard has very limited resources, way into international waters, and interdict drug boats, and then what? And then seize them, and then return those people to their, and try them here in America, but they're in international waters. You know how, what the problem there is, right? They're being struck in international waters, not when they enter. So the Coast Guard waits for them to enter territorial waters and then arrest them and come on. I don't have an issue. It's just making an issue out of nothing. It's a novel idea what they're doing. But Trump is full of novel ideas. If it works, it works. So again, the Democrats are on the side of drug dealers. They're people too. They were people. All right. On a more serious note, New York Post Ron Johnson tells Pod Force One he is perplexed by bizarre mystery surrounding Trump's would-be assassin. Yeah, I'd issue pulling up the text for this story because I hate Safari, and it just it's something that Safari and the New York Post website, they don't work well together. So there was an issue there. But if you didn't know, if if you knew what, okay, Podforce One is Miranda Devine's podcast. And she talked to Ron Johnson, who during COVID became a conspiracy theorist. He started doing his research and he realized what we all have realized for some time is that we're not being told the truth about anything. So he turned from the COVID conspiracy surrounding the vaccines and the damage done and all that. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But he turned his attention to Matthew Crooks, the would-be assassin of Donald Trump. And it's apparent now that there's intelligence involvement, that this wasn't some low nut job, that they keep using this cover. He's alone and creating these low nut jobs, sending them out under the guise of they're working on a special mission. And they always show up there and they look around and they're alone. Big surprise. But they are involved with other people. I believe it's all intelligence driven. As I said, my theories around this are obvious, involve the internet, mentally ill individuals, and getting them to act like robots and basically do highly suggestible young men and using their psychological profile and psychological techniques to manipulate them and basically mind control them to get them to do these things with obviously stand down assistance. The attempt never would have happened if everybody did their job. Like I said, I was watching the rally. Counter sniper team. The funny thing is that was the first time that Donald Trump ever had a counter sniper team. Why? Because the threat was so large. Counter sniper team on the roof of the barn looking directly at that roof. They didn't see a guy jogging along the top of a roof with a rifle. They waited for him to get off 8 shots and then shot him. Bullshit. The place where he climbed up on the roof, right? There was a sniper in that window. And miraculously, right before Crooks climbed up on the roof, they abandoned their post. Oh, and we got locked out of the building. Bullshit. And we still don't really know whether Crooks took the first shot that almost took Trump's head off. Very likely it was another sniper. We looked at the footage. There are a couple places, including on top of the main building of the glass manufacturer. There are plenty of places for a sniper to hide there and not even be seen by cameras panning the area or what have you. I mean, there were plenty of places, and I've had this theory going for a while. That's a possibility still. But the fact is that he got off all those shots before he got taken out. And then it was allowed to roam around and fly a drone and all this stuff is just ridiculous. All the failings, bullshit. It's just, it irks me. It irks me to no end, you know, and his parents and then the whole, it's really, I could go on and on, but I won't. We got more from the Federalist. Trump administration probe federal subsidies pushing kids on screens at school. The most recent National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP scores show high school math and reading scores at the lowest levels on record. Right. So what we're talking about here is a push, and there has been this push. I mean, oh my God, my whole 30-year career in journalism dealing with schools, I was witness to the push of getting people on screens, getting students on screens. The reasoning being, and if you went into a classroom at any time recently, you would see little kids all sitting at their desk with computers in front of their faces. I'm not saying people shouldn't be trained on computers. They definitely should. However, There's already been experimentation. They're setting up education to be handed over to artificial intelligence. And that's not a good thing. I had another glitch here, so let's see if we can fix it. Glitchy Gumi. All right, next article up, again from the Federalist. Children died, and 20 other shocking things an FDA scientist just said about the COVID shot. So we know this well. At least 10 children died after COVID jab. CDC overlooked COVID shot safety signal, obviously. They actually put out a warning label saying what some of the things, some of the side effects could be. And all of those were experienced, especially myocarditis, way more than Guillain-Barré syndrome or any of that. FDA, CDC ignored evidence of booster mandate harm. Of course. Anytime you force people to do things they don't want to do because the best advocate for your health is you. FDA ignored safety signal until after selling young boys on jabs. The FDA has never admitted that there were deaths after the COVID shots. Indeed, there were. The real number of COVID jab deaths is higher than believed. Of course it is. That was very dangerous thing. And there's more sinister motive behind it. If you didn't really know, it's to move all vaccination into mRNA, not because it's more effective, because it's more detrimental to human health. And anything that's detrimental to human health is a boon for pharmaceutical industries. Biden vax mandates bear some blame, some, most, cost me my job. There are still many unknowns. The funny thing is, too, is that I had all the receipts. I worked in journalism. I said, look, look at the studies. Look at what the studies show. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent transmission, and it doesn't prevent infection. There's none of those things. So why do I need to take it? And nobody was even in the office yet. But they look at me like a deer in the headlights. What do you mean? And even early on, I was asked by people in the community, hey, are you going to take the vaccine? I go, the jury's still out. I'd have to see. And of course, when the information started coming out, it was obvious that it didn't work. You know, it's not like it worked and it had some side effects. It didn't work. Let's be fair. It provided several weeks, up to 2 months of some protection. After that, it made you more vulnerable to contraction, infection, which then, of course, makes you a risk of transmitting it to other people. There's still many unknowns. Red tape-ridden vaccine reaction reporting suggests adverse events fly under the radar. Yeah, the VAERS system reporting. The problem is it's not, you can report to VAERS system, but the verification method means that when they regurgitate the numbers, there's a whole lot of data missing. So you don't get the full picture. FDA failed to enforce COVID jab sponsors' commitment to conduct certain studies, which they didn't do, of course. COVID shot investigation only possible because of Trump's FDA pick. Indeed, and overall vaccine scrutiny under RFK Jr. Vaccines are not universal. They don't react the same to everybody. And people that claim that they do don't know anything. Anyone claiming COVID causes more myocarditis than the jab is obviously wrong. Indeed, it is. It's a false denominator. COVID shot doesn't prevent transmission. We know that. Leaks were unethical, illegal, and factually inaccurate. Safety won't be sacrificed on the altar of vaccine maker incentives. Indeed, I mean, the federal government, your tax dollars, gave tens of billions of dollars to the pharmaceutical industry. And the shit didn't even work, so, or it didn't work well enough. It didn't provide you with immunity. The old type of vaccine, you would take it and it would last years because it was based on real inoculation, which is you get an attenuated real virus, a dead virus, put it into your system, and then your body would react and the same method of you if you had gotten sick. And they found also that if you got COVID, you were way more had way more immunity to the disease moving forward than if you had gotten the shot. And that's the thing. My next door neighbor, fucking lunatic, goes, I don't know, we keep getting COVID. We got all the shots. I think the first year I got it twice. I think I only got it once a year. Knock on wood. Safety won't be sacrificed on the altar of vaccine maker incentive. Evidence-based vaccines are the best. Flu shot framework will be revised. FDA's multiple vaccine studies created false sense of efficacy and safety. They were bullshit. No evidence that COVID shots benefit third parties. Like I said, transmission. It didn't prevent transmission. Leakers and closed-minded staff are welcome to resign. Certainly are. No evidence that COVID shots benefit third parties. Yeah, well, the thing is, it prevented infection in some people up to 3 weeks to a month, up to 2 months maybe at the most, and then the efficacy started to wane. But you could still get sick during that. And there was no indication that if you got sick after you got your vaccination, that it did anything to prevent transmission to anybody. Because that's not the way it works. If you're sick, first of all, if you're sick, as soon as you get sick, you need to keep the replication of the virus at a minimum. If you do that, you don't feel really terrible. You don't have symptoms. And the symptoms are caused by the replication of the virus. So if you take your zinc and your hydroxychloroquine or your ivermectin to keep the replication low, then the likelihood of you spreading the disease is lower because it's the high replication disease that makes you infectious. And what they found was that if you got the jab, they said it lessened your symptoms. There was no data to actually prove that. And then you could still infect other people. So if it did keep the replication of the virus at a minimum, I would have to see the science. It just, the way the whole mRNA thing worked, it didn't really make much sense to me, but whatever. Trust the science. Federalist again. Justice Clarence Thomas dismantles New Jersey lawfare against Pro-Life Center with a single question. If you didn't know, they were suing Pro-Life Center, saying they were keeping people from getting abortions. Oh. Oh, no. Horror. In a stunning admission, Liar acknowledged that New Jersey AG's office hadn't had complaints about this specific center. If there was ever a perfect case study in just how destructive the Democratic Party's two top policy priorities, mass welfare and distribution unchecked. Oh, this is from text from another store. Excuse me. We'll move on. I just wanted to say about that Clarence Thomas story. I thought I had text from that. That they lied, that they were trying to shut down a pro-life center. The government was, the lawsuit was, and they were blaming complaints filed against pro-life centers across the country. But Clarence Thomas just asked him, was there one complaint against this specific center? And the answer was no. So they just wanted to shut down a pro-life center for no reason. That's the Democrats. More fraud. Fraud, lies, propaganda, just basically bullshit. So if you want to base your life on bullshit, vote for Democrats. If you want to base your life on truth, objective truth and results and, reward for your hard work and dedication and all these things, your merit, or if you just want to give handouts to people that don't give a shit, don't want to work, don't want to even try anything. Next article up here, again from the Federalist, how Florida can reform property taxes to incentivize young families. Property taxes and primary residences in Florida may be eliminated after Governor Ron DeSantis made headlines last week by calling for their abolition. DeSantis has indicated he's in favor of completely ending the taxes on private residences and wants the boldest amendment possible on his desk to sign. The Florida governor is right to want home ownership to be less burdensome, but legislators must consider carefully what would most benefit their state and constituents, especially young families struggling to enter the market. Property taxes have been in place since before America's founding and for the early days of the colonies till now, have served as the primary means of funding local government services. Over the centuries, the definitions of taxable property were narrowed to exclude things like household goods, tools, livestock. So today, most Americans pay property taxes only on their homes and perhaps vehicles. Florida doesn't have a vehicle property tax. I, of course, in a high state tax state of Connecticut, have to pay high taxes on both. And that has to do with the municipality, really. But it's state law that allows the municipality to tax you on X. So obviously homes, but in my state, the state said, yes, you could tax on motor vehicles. So my municipality said, yay, give me some money. This is great. I think like in a lot of countries, like in Mexico and in a lot of countries and in some states, you can get a reduced tax if you're a senior. But in places like Mexico, seniors in Mexico, when you hit 65, you can stop paying property tax. And that should be in this country as well. Also, I would say there should be some sort of deferred tax on new home ownership. But realistically, folks, is that most people buy houses with a mortgage, and most mortgages roll in the property tax into the mortgage. So even now, one of my residences I'm paying a mortgage on is rolled in, and so you don't see it. The problem is when you pay off your property and then that bill comes in twice a year, you're like, what the fuck? I just got a reassessment because of inflation, property values went up all over the place, specifically, and in my area specifically, generally, went up all over the place because of inflation, but specifically in my area, because people were flooding New York to come into my area where I own, and that raised prices also. So as soon as prices go up in a municipality, they rush for reassessment. Now, if property prices go down in your municipality, they don't reassess, because then they would lose money if your taxes actually went down with the property values, but they don't do that. Only when they go up, and they do it quickly when the property values skyrocket, the municipalities quickly move in to reassess. They could temper that by adjusting the mill rate. We'll see what happens in my case. Florida, here I come. Another headline here, post-millennial, trans matrix co-director Lily Wachowski. I can't believe, I didn't know this guy went trans. Apparently both the brothers went trans. So Lily Wachowski says conservatives using the term red-pilled are fascists. Of course they are. Wachowski said that it was pornography that drew him to the trans lifestyle. How old are you? I don't understand, if you're not really young or married, why would you be drawn to pornography? Why don't you go out and fuck somebody? There's nothing keeping you from doing that. You could pay somebody. You could go to a massage parlor. You could fly to friggin' Las Vegas. If you got nothing better to do, spend your annual vacation flying to Las Vegas or to Amsterdam or something. Or, if you're a fucking pedophile, you could go to Bangkok. I don't know. And that is what fascism does, says Lily. It takes these things, these ideas, and this doesn't make any sense, that are generally acknowledged as questions or investigations as, truisms about, humanity and life, and they turn them into something else so that they remove the weight of what those things represent. And and Lily there is talking about red pill. Because understanding the universe, you need to understand duality. I'm not saying that there's no gray area. Gradations. There's no gradient. The truth is duality. It either is or it isn't. The ought and the not. Simple as that. And if you don't understand that and you just think, well, it's fluid. It's not fluid. They either are or they are not. A chair is either there or it's not. And the thing is, if you study philosophy, is not a negation, or is it the void? And that's another thing where you get into negative polarity is the void the not, or is just the negative aspect of something the not? So something to chew on. Just the News has the headline, Stanford student paper reveals American scientists linked to entity under Chinese nuclear program. So the Stanford University newspaper penned another story linking a school professor with the Chinese Communist Party. According to the investigation, Wendy Mao, who is Stanford's Earth Sciences Chair and Principal Investigator at Stanford's Institute for Material and Energy Sciences at SLAC, has collaborated for at least 2 decades with the Center for High Pressure Science and Technology, which was added to the U.S. Commerce Department's entities list in 2020 and is considered a subsidiary of technology complex leading China's nuclear weapons program. Everything in China is run by the Communist Party. So it's not like here where you have things that aren't part of the government. They might work with the government in a fascist sense, or the government works for them in a fascist sense, whatever. But there might be a public-private partnership, but it is distinctly different. Additionally, some collaborative publications appear to have been funded in part by at least 7 U.S. government agencies. So now that makes you wonder. 7 U.S. government agencies also worked with HP Star. It is true that high-pressure experiments are used by scientists working on the domain of nuclear weapons. And so the Stanford Review published this article, and then the detractors said, well, it's not, they're not really working with nuclear weapons. And they're, no, but they exploiting the dual-use technologies and knowledge to boost defense programs is what's at issue here. These scientific experiments are used in the research for nuclear weapons, period. For example, in the past, China purchased civilian helicopter engines from 2 French aviation companies in 2012, which were later appropriated for Army and Navy helicopters, of course. There's nothing, everything under communism is under a centralized government, national government, a federal government. Not in this, in the United States, it's federal because it's a federated system, but the communists make the centralized power in a central government, national government. Got a couple minutes left. Washington Post, the loneliest Americans according to a survey of 3,000 adults. And this isn't, the problem is, again, with the headline here, they just misconstrue what it says. It's not the loneliest Americans are, this age group. It says Americans, right in the lead, Americans are growing lonelier. That's the point. That's what the actual headline should have been. According to a new research released Wednesday, even when they're not actually alone. And it talks about 40 and 50-year-olds are lonely because their parents are doing whatever. And the research was done by the AARP. And of course, you could read this whole thing, and they don't talk about fucking social media and cell phones. The more that you try to cure your loneliness through your smartphone, through social media, you become less social, you interact with less people and more with technology, and that's what they want you to do. And that's why you become lonelier. Even though you might be around people all the time, you might have 5 kids and you have your wife at home, and maybe your mother-in-law lives with you, or so your house is full of people. But if you take a cross section, look into the lives of these people, and you go in their houses and they're all on their cell phones. So they're around each other, but they're on their cell phones. That's what makes you lonely. I mean, people do get lonely. It's the absolute truth, just regularly. I don't mind being alone, but if you don't have anyone or a pet or anything to share companionship with, and that's the key, is companionship, because people like companionship because it makes you a better person if you're allowed to bounce ideas off other people. And if it's a good idea and they react positively to what you say or do, that is affirmation, and that's good for you. And then if you do something that's stupid and they give you shit for it, then you're able to correct. And as Jordan Peterson said, you must have a system to correct in the face of error. So if you do something wrong, it's even in your nature to make sure you don't do that again. And that applies to the social sphere as well. So don't be lonely. Put your phone in a drawer, go outside, go talk to people, even if it's at the supermarket or on the, wherever. Go for a hike. You see people out, just strike up a conversation, which I grew up shy. It was terribly hard for me to do. But then once I started working in journalism, you're forced to talk to people. And I found it easier and easier. And to not have a forced conversation, just be like, hey, what's up? And if you smile at somebody and you just give them a nod or something, they're more apt to open up to you. So in that case, I don't really care now. It's like, since I got married, a lot of your friendships fall by the wayside because especially if you have friends that are non-married, they're out doing other adventurous things that my wife wouldn't necessarily like. Anyway, CNBC, the wealth of the top 1% reaches a record 52 trillion. The top 10% of Americans added 5 trillion to their wealth in the second quarter as the stock market rally continued to benefit the biggest investors. Of course, all wealth groups saw gains over the past year. Goes without saying, takes money to make money. And if you invest, that's how you make money. You want to see double-digit returns, obviously. And if you're doing that over time, and you spend all your time doing that, you're going to make a lot of money. I probably should do that more. Just the stock market sometimes, I mean, I have some investments, but it's gambling. You could lose the money. And see, if you've got a lot of money, you could risk losing money. But if you just have barely enough money to get by, and maybe you could squirrel away a little, you have a nest egg, you're not going to risk your whole nest egg on gambling in the stock market. But there's a whole way to diversify your investing to make it more safe, and you have some in riskier investments, and that's where all your growth is, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Washington Post, these companies want to block the sun to cool the planet. Should we invest in these companies? Make Sunset has raised more than $1 million from investors. Somebody's investing there, and sold more than 100,000 worth of cooling credits. Stardust has raised $75 million to develop a more sophisticated engineering method, and it says it will be ready to launch by the end of the decade. Oh, they're doing it right now. The company has sparked debate about the role private firms should play in tinkering with the global climate. They've been doing this since the 70s. I'm telling you, for those who lived before the mid-70s or early 70s, mid-60s, the sky never looked like it looks now. There were contrails back in the 60s and 70s, the high altitude jets creating contrails. You know what a contrail is. What's going on now is not contrails. Washington Post, how George Soros changed criminal justice in America. We know all this. Thank you for the Washington Post to report on what we already know, which is George Soros and the left goes in and he puts lots of money into particularly DA races because they want crime and for a specific reason. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. Don't forget, you're under attack psychologically and biologically, so stay hip to the trick. And I will see you tomorrow. I'm sorry about last night. Didn't get a Tuesday the Perry episode up last night. We weren't in communication, and I fell asleep on the couch, so there it is. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream, 10 a.m. on Rumble and other platforms. Join me on social media as well, Getter Minds, Facebook, Substack, True Social. See you tomorrow. Respect.
The New World Order